Hello, and welcome to the Bitchuation Room podcast live stream once again here on a Sunday afternoon evening. I'm your host, Francesca Fiorentini. Happy New Year again. How's it been? How are the resolutions going? Yeah, they good? I set intentions and then I tried to not disturb the smoke detector. I'm pretty sure the smoke detector in my home does not work because I've set way too many intentions and I'm like, this shit, my intention is to not die in a fire. So anyway, thank you guys so much for being here. Thank you for tuning in on all the things on YouTube. If you're here, if you're listening as a podcast, give this podcast 5 stars. If you're watching on Twitch, what's up? So good to have you. We have such a good show today. Political strategist and founder of the Black Futures Lab, Alicia Garza, is back on the program. I want to get all of her thoughts on where to from here for the left. What do we do now that it's very clear that Joe Biden, not quite the guy we thought he pretty much the guy we thought he was going to be. There was a moment there where we were like, maybe he won't be the guy, but he's probably going to be that centrist that he thought he was. Also with me is comedian and labor organizer Nato Green. If you guys know, if you listen to the show, you know we should actually be in person right now. We should be at the San Francisco Sketch Fest. We should be live. There should be people in the crowd. I feel them. I feel the lights. We'll be hanging out. We're having drinks afterwards, because there is no such thing as the Omicron variant. And instead, we're at home. So I couldn't obviously, I couldn't go a week without doing a show. And I'm so glad you guys are here, even though we're not live. And the show, the live Sketchfest show, will happen in 2023. I was just told. So if you have tickets, I believe they're asking you to hold on to them and they'll be good in 2023 in San Francisco. And if you didn't get tickets, you've got plenty of time to get tickets for Sketchfest in 2023. And look, I think it's the same price, yo. So inflation does not count. But before we get into everything that's been going on this week, I wanted to let you guys know that this show is 100% ad-free and 100% sponsored by you, the people, the Frantifa. That is no small feat, and I am so thankful for everyone who's given to the show, who's a patron of this show, and as a patron, which you can become at patreon.com/bitchuationroom, you not only get 15 to 20 minutes of bonus content every single week. We do a bonus story. Not only do you get access to that, but you get 20% off of all the merchandise at bitchuationroom.com, all the Frantifa swag. You get automatically get 20% off of that. And if you're a patron at $20 or more per month, after 3 months, you get a free piece of merch. So you see how this works? You see how this pyramid scheme of love unfolds before your very eyes and supports small lefty podcasts like myself? Anyway, so do that. And thank you everyone who has joined. And hey, if you do not want to become a patron, I don't know why you wouldn't, but if you're more comfortable with things like Venmo or Cash App, TBR-live on Venmo, TBR live on Cash App, tip this show. And last announcement, this is exciting, but last announcement is, even though we don't have a live show in San Francisco this week, there will be a live show in Brooklyn, New York, people. We're going to Brooklyn. Me, Matt Lieb, and Mr. Sam Cedar of The Majority Report will be live in Brooklyn at the Bell House on March 10th. Tickets are almost on sale. But here's the thing. I know it's a hard moment. I know a lot of cities are seeing a surge, and I hope and pray, and I am 75% sure that by March 10th, which is a Thursday, we will have this thing, as in the COVID thing, fairly much on the downswing, fairly much. You see how descriptive and scientific that was? Well, so please Mark that on your calendars. Get your asses to Brooklyn. We'll be masked. We'll be vaxxed. You should be boosted. And let's try to fucking have fun while we still can, and enjoy some live Frantifa action. And with that, let's get in this week, you guys. What are you bitching about? It's been a week. It's been quite a week. The first week of the new year. This is what are you bitching about? Okay, so here's what I'm bitching about. Very petty. Now, knowing what we know now about the virus and that it is 70 times more contagious now in the Omicron stage, which was however many more times contagious than the Delta variant, which is however many more times more contagious than the original strain. Aren't you guys a little bit like, yo, can I have my March 2020 back, please? Like, what was I'm not, like, hashtag no anti-vax, but like, or like, COVID is real and all, but it was a lot less contagious back in 2020. And part of me is like, why did I do that many puzzles? Why couldn't I should have gathered more with people who I love, you know? But of course, we didn't know anything about COVID. We still seem to not know anything about COVID. And so now, when I really can't take another lockdown, not being able to see people, not being able to do stand-up comedy, or feeling afraid that if I do stand-up comedy, I'm gonna like kill my mom if I see her, or like get somebody else sick, or like just thinking of like immunocompromised people. Like it's such a fucking back and forth. But now I'm like, man, I feel like the OG virus was like my time to shine. And maybe that was my window, and that's closed. And I'm feeling petty about it. I want to bitch about that because now it is way more contagious. And yeah, some cases are more mild, especially if you're vaccinated and boosted. But guess what? Like AOC just got the vaccine. I mean, just got the virus. Protect her at all costs. But guess what, guys? Deaths and hospitalizations, sadly, and as suspected, are going up. Yes, in places like New York, Chicago, and I can't remember where else, but the big cities, they're going up. We all were like, hey, maybe it's not gonna impact it. No, it impacted it. It's going up. Anyway, that's what I'm bitching about. And with me for the hour to bitch and to bonus bitch for the patrons, a comedian, a union organizer who's got a series Laughter Against the Machine that can be found on Means TV. His comedy albums, The Whiteness Album and The Nato Green Party, are available on Bandcamp and everywhere. Please welcome Mr. Nato Green. Hell yeah. What's up, Nato? First show with Nato in 2022.
Hey, everybody. Happy New Year? Question mark?
Big old question mark. How you doing? What are you bitching about, sir?
Well, here's what I'm bitching about is the challenge of being a hypochondriac slash Jew in this moment in history when they're like, they keep being like, well, if you're symptomatic, blah blah blah, if you show signs of based on the higher contagion rate, like if you're symptomatic, you should get tested. There might be signs of you have to assume that it's positive. And so it's like, oh, if so, then every time I cough, I'm like, oh, that's definitely it. And so and then like I'm in a place and it goes down the wrong pipe and I start coughing and everyone is like COVID and they run away from me and I'm like, no, I actually choking to death and I need help. And they're like, no, you COVID. I'm running away from the coughing guy. And like, yeah, can I have a Heimlich? Not and then like so the coughing and the sore. I have a sore throat all the time. I'm sure it's like psychosomatic. I'm just like I'm worrying. Oh, and then I like read the things where it's like the symptoms of COVID are coughing and sore throat and fever. And I'm like, oh, it seems warm right now. I don't know. I'm a little bit sweaty. Like, and then, oh, and one of the signs of COVID is like, ashy shins. So like I definitely, oh, one of the signs of COVID is snoring. It's like, oh, I definitely have, like, they're just like, it's so wired
Uh-huh.
into my anxiety, and I don't know how to, like, just mentally, like, without sticking something up my nose to test every 15 minutes. I don't know how to, like,
Don't you wish it
assess.
were like the chicken pox, Like, this is the moment where you're like, "Yeah, maybe I should just get it," but then your antibodies are only good for another couple weeks,
Right.
right? And not even as good as, getting another booster. I just ever since the CDC took its hands off the wheels, I'm like, "Well, then now I'm frightened. Now I don't know what the fuck is going on. Now I don't know how to live my life, really. I need Rochelle Walensky to tell me things." Um,
Yeah, I mean,
Poorly.
it's like there's some metaphor that I'm struggling to, like, find, but that that as it evolves into new variants, the fact that, like, we're all, like, living on infectious disease Twitter now, do you know what I mean? That, like, the biggest influencers are
Epidemiologist.
epidemiologists and, like, fucking biostatisticians. It's what has happened to our society. Those are the cool people on Twitter now. And then there's, like, Twitter beefs. Like, there was this doctor in San Francisco that, like, got super popular on Twitter, and people turned on her, and she was like, "She's bad," and then there's, like, factions of which doctor at the University of California, San Francisco Med Center, like, people are aligning themselves with, like, it's the fucking, like, variations of, like Methodists and Lutherans and Episcopalians and these, like, from the
Pagan.
outside, yeah, pagans, they all just love it. They're like, they all look the same, but from the inside, so we're getting hung pain the words of trying to parse these tweets from doctors where we don't really understand what they're saying. Uh, but it seems like it gets more infectious and less dangerous as it evolves. So
Yes.
it seems like in another 3 months, like we're in the Omicron wave, but then the next wave, it is just going to be like we're all going to have it at the same time, and it's going to be we're all going to have it at the exact same minute we're going to get it, and then we're going to lose it. But while we have it, we're just, like, going to have to pee really bad. That's going to
Yeah.
be the only symptom, and then we're done.
Yeah, I'm
That's
expecting
what
it
the,
to be like,
that's
yeah, my
that's what
left
the
tit is
scientists.
gonna hurt, and I'll be like, "Cool," and then, like, I'm like I'm not thirsty for a day. Like, something really
Yeah,
bizarre, or, like, my teeth are whiter, I'm waiting
right, right.
for it to be just yeah, that's the kind of COVID I want. I want the very highly evolved, less deadly COVID. Anyway, that being said, we need
and
some
I
of
ke-
those
and I
influencers on this show soon.
I keep we can probably figure that out. I keep reading about this stuff about how, like, after the bubonic plague, when, like, huge portions of the population of Europe died, that, like, the Black Death is partially responsible for the Renaissance, and, like, rising income
You
levels
can't
in
quit
Europe
comedy now, NATO. You
because
gotta stick with it.
I don't know if the audience of the Bitchuation Room knows this, but as a comedian, literally every single time before I walk out on stage, the last thing, my pre-show mantra is, maybe tonight is the night I quit comedy. Every single time.
That's the way a lot of comics are, and then they do well on stage and they crush, and then they're like, "Okay, I like it again, I guess." Um, we gotta get into this week though. And we have to get Alicia Garza into the convo, but so much happened in this first week. This was a week where former Secretary of State Mike Pompeo says that he lost 90 pounds, making him fit enough to fight his own war in Iran. Of course, Trump must be pleased to know that this now means he is no longer the biggest loser of his administration. Eric Adams began his first week as mayor of New York, and he began it by calling cooks unskilled workers, calling for more cops in the subway, and appointing his brother as deputy police commissioner. But he's vegan. Come on, guys. Plant based corruption. Ahmaud Arbery's killers were convicted and sentenced to life in prison without parole, which is great. Now do the cops. Trailblazing black actor Sidney Poitier passed away at the age of 94. He was the first black actor to get into a fight with a white person on screen, first black actor to kiss a white woman on screen, and was the first black actor to win an Oscar and the last one to do so in the following 40 years. But please tell me more about liberal Hollywood. And 34-year-old Senator John Ossoff is introducing legislation that would ban Congresspeople and their families from trading stocks while in office, throwing shade on Speaker of the House Nancy Pelosi, who probably both regrets saying it was perfectly fine to trade stocks and saying that she would let John Ossoff whip her vote. You know what I mean? Oh, yes. Just take me and my Hermes scarf, Mr. Ossoff. I hate you now. For everything else, this is the week where. This was the week where the U.S. marked a year since radicalized Facebook boomers stormed the Capitol in Amazon-bought tactical gear on January 6th, the closest the U.S. has ever been to a coup that it wasn't directly involved in. Well, at least most of the country wasn't involved in it. Both President Biden and Attorney General Merrick Garland spoke out publicly condemning the January 6th insurrection, vowing to continue to bring those involved to justice. Again, about 700 rubes have been arrested thus far and are taking a fun field trip into the heart of the prison industrial complex. They're learning a lot. Baloney is terrible in there, apparently. And all while the January 6th Commission in the House continues to investigate the role of lawmakers and Trump officials and Trump himself, still, some people like Brennan Center's Michael German say that it's actually the arrests that have been made haven't been enough high-level people. They've been low-level folks, and a lot of the folks who've committed the worst acts of violence aren't the ones being arrested. And here's what he had to say on PBS. Please don't take this down.
Law enforcement has cast a wide net, charging more than 700 rioters, including dozens from right-wing groups, the Proud Boys, Oath Keepers, and 3%ers. But the majority of those are not for violent acts such as assault.
The Justice Department's efforts seem to front-load people who were involved in the least egregious conduct. There were hundreds, if not thousands, of people engaging in violence against police officers. That should have been the primary focus, because many of those people still have yet to be charged and are out in the communities, still able to organize, still able to attend events.
This year, across multiple states, Proud Boys have attended school board meetings to back those opposed to COVID measures and critical race theory, or CRT.
Anytime that there is a contentious issue, such as the mask mandate or CRT in our schools or forced vaccinations of our children, you're going to see more Proud Boys.
That man does not have children. Nato, reflections, thoughts on this 1 year later? And also, have you encountered Proud Boys in your school board meetings?
No, we don't have. Proud Boys don't come to our school board meetings. We get like the genteel version of it, of of like of like people who like have a like believe science window sign, like Black Lives Matter window sign, and then they're like, definitely keep schools open no matter what, even if everyone is dead. We got those people at the school board.
Teachers are greedy.
Yeah, these uppity bitches teaching third grade with 40 students, while they're having while they're literally on a respirator trying to teach subtraction. That's what we have.
But so here you have these folks out. I mean, like, it's true. Like 700 people sounds like a lot, but every time you look back at footage on January 6th, you're like, there are tens of thousands of people storming the Capitol right now. Like, I don't think you're getting them all.
And the whole thing was sort of clearly, like, what has come out is that there was some level of coordination with like Ted Cruz and Josh Hawley, and like that there were people in Congress and in the Senate, of sitting Republican legislators who were actively encouraging and attempting to coordinate it to thwart the election. And so, I mean, in some ways, it's like the most the thinking about it on the 1 year anniversary, like what's striking is the degree to which so many like liberals and progressives have just like resign themselves to like, yes, this was, this was the rehearsal, and then they're going to figure it out better next time, and they'll do
Yeah.
a voter suppression, and we're not going to have democracy again in the United States. We'll have sham elections, and it's going to be fine.
There is a fatalism among, I think, a lot of like pundits, which like I hate that kind of shit. Like I hate that. I mean, and I think you as an organizer too, and as an optimist, despite what people might think of you, um, is despite being perpetual Eeyore, you are an optimist. And it's like it is so awful to think, yeah, next time they are just gonna, they'll do it, but in suits. And everyone's just kind of not okay with that, but spelling that out, and we're doing it very eyes wide open. I mean, and this is like when Trump got elected, I think everyone also was like, "Oh, how long before there're going to be mobs running up at the Capitol? Like how long before this violence is coming home to roost?" And that's why I don't know, the day of I felt so much like chickens coming home to roost. And I was glad that instead of these oath keepers, 3%ers, all these militias taking it out on black activists, on on people on the streets, that oh yeah. No. Go take it to the Capitol. Go take it to the lawmakers who've been ignoring your very presence and your very violence. It almost felt fitting. It was very fitting, actually.
So the way that I've been attempting to cope with this emotionally is like I spent a fair amount of time like imagining um like like how Trump should die. Um and I mean
Oh,
I
totally.
was
It's like
like
that's like my favorite game.
so I spent a while fantasizing that he like was sort of like mysteriously deported into like an international prison, like the pit that
Mhm.
Bruce Wayne is in The Dark Knight Rises, where it's like in another country, and and then there's like a bandaged old doctor who's like, "Jump, Donald Trump," and he can't jump out. Um, like, and then I was like, no, because then that'll like support the Proud Boy and the Oath Keepers like
Yeah,
conspiracy
that's the
theories.
origin story they want, yeah.
Yeah, so then I was like, "No, my fantasy is, because he needs to be, humiliated and then die, but all at
Yes,
once." And so
yes.
here's what I've been thinking about, is my fantasy is that, and I hope I don't get like, they're gonna hear this, they're gonna find it, and then I'm gonna get murdered, and it'll be too bad. But my fantasy is that, like, he's giving a press conference at Mar-a-Lago, and he gets, like, violent diarrhea, so
Yes.
that's so explosive that it blows out the back of his, like, Men's Warehouse ill-fitting slacks, and then his heart explodes. Um,
Yes. No,
so
the explosive diarrhea has to be combined. I've talked about this before. Kate Elston, who's a producer on Newsbroke, we talked about it before. The explosive diarrhea has to shoot out of the diaper that he swears he never wears. And then it's like a combo. But yes, his heart explodes from
it has to
shame.
like
But
like, as a parent, we talk about blowouts, like, where the diaper if your kid has explosive diarrhea and they're wearing a diaper, it, like, shoots up their back, so they have, like, racing stripes of, like, shit that goes up their back. That's like when you have a little baby, and so what I imagine is that the explosive diarrhea shoots out of his diaper so violently that it goes up his back, and then it blows the hair off the front. So, like, the hair is, like, all fucking blown out carrot top style, caked with
like a like a
diarrhea.
like a troll of diarrhea.
Yeah, and then death.
I love that. But let's talk about what's actually been done. So one of the biggest things coming out of January 6th was like, what is Biden going to do? How is he going to take like far right extremist violence seriously? Some call it terrorism, some do not. I don't want to get into those semantics right now, but it looks like he has taken some steps, and then we can talk about the impact of those steps. So one of the things is that the Homeland Security Department has begun a review of how it handles domestic extremism. Oh, yeah, you should. So, for the first time this year, the department is designating domestic extremism as, quote, a national priority area, requiring that 7.5% of the billions in grant funds be spent on combating it, which feels low considering the attack. Obviously, this is in direct contrast to his predecessor, Trump, who, like, if you mentioned any kind of militias, you'd be fired. But Biden has bolstered a team focusing on domestic extremism at the NSC, and that has been depleted in the past 4 years under Trump, assigning officials from the Justice Department, the FBI, and the National Counterterrorism Center to that team. This is in contrast to the approaches of Trump and Obama. In 2009, the Obama administration rescinded an intelligence assessment after it mentioned that veterans could be vulnerable to recruitment by domestic extremist groups, prompting political backlash. Not enough political backlash, but this was something that in the work that, in some of the research that I did earlier for an old Newsbrook piece a while ago, but it was like Obama thought it would be too divisive to look into the military, and people like Ashley Babbitt, one of the only people shot and killed by law enforcement that day. She was a 14-year Air Force veteran, which is insane, right? So it has been rife, and there have been whistleblower after whistleblower to talk about in the police force, in the armed services, the amount of extremism that exists. Maybe finally we're getting serious about that extremism.
A lot of that, a lot of that military legacy goes back like way into the early days of the Iraq War, where like there was this program they called them moral waivers. That was the term under Bush,
Mhm.
because so until Obama repealed Don't Ask, Don't Tell, it was you could enlist in the military if you were a active white supremacist, but not if you were gay. And so like lo and behold, so they were like, because there was this troop depletion between the Afghanistan war and the Iraq war, and they had to figure out how to keep recruiting people, and they didn't want to reinstate the draft. The way that they dealt with that was through moral waivers by making it easier to recruit criminals and white supremacists. And
I have teacher, this is my moral waiver. Like
yeah,
I do not have to have a heart. In
uh,
fact, it's probably better if I want to oppress people in foreign nations if I don't have a heart. And the military is like, hell yeah.
if I want to go do some war crimes,
Yeah, you're not going to want me to have a moral in this situation. I don't know why I said teacher. It's definitely Sarge, but like it's very funny to have like a get out of morality free card. Like, oh, I am a raging racist. I believe in a white ethno state. Anyway, you should know that about me. Also, I have a bunion, so they're like, nope, the bunion prohibits you from serving in this war. I'm sorry, soldier. Now I think there's, I don't know how you take this, Nato, but there's been outcry and rightful criticism of the idea that we're going to go after white far right extremism in the same way that we went after, Muslim extremism, because, well, first of all, that shit didn't work. Number one, locking up however many innocent people, surveilling entire communities, but also like, you guys are the ones doing it. How can the FBI, which is cropped up and its entire purpose has been to undermine like, democratic movements from Martin Luther King to the Black Panthers, generally movements led by Black people. Like, how are you going to suddenly turn a racist institution on itself when you've got extremists within your ranks, within police departments, within the military? Like, you got to remake that shit from the ground up.
it reminds at the end of the year, Obama like tweets out his list of books and movies and albums that he liked that year, and one of his favorite movies of the year was Judas and the Black Messiah.
Mhm.
And I was like, yeah, but he was rooting for the FBI agent. Um, you know,
Yeah, I mean, that is interesting because I didn't know that, Obama probably trying to, pacify the right, who ironically was only further radicalized by his very presidency, defunded a lot of those areas of the security state in terms of not going after far right extremism, anti-government extremism. I do want to say though that those criticisms of Biden's like, re-upping of, domestic extremism and the fear that that would fall on the backs of people on the left have actually borne out to some extent. So, um, right after January 6th, guess who passed an anti-protest law or got that rammed through? It was Governor DeSantis of Florida. So I didn't remember this, but Governor DeSantis condemned the actions of Donald Trump supporters and said, quote, "It was totally unacceptable and those folks need to be held accountable. And it doesn't matter what banner you're flying under. The violence is wrong and the rioting and the disorder is wrong." That's what he said about January 6th. Well, later on that year, he passed his anti-protest legislation called the Combating Public Disorder legislation, which when it was originally introduced did not have a lot of traction. After January 6th, got it passed. It targets protesters who damage personal and business property or assault law enforcement. Violators could face felony battery charges if they commit burglary during a riot. Okay, that seems, maybe that's acceptable, but further down, the bill also says a person cannot intentionally obstruct free, convenient, or normal use of the public street, highway, or road by impeding, hindering, stifling, retarding, or restraining traffic or passage thereon. Basically, you can't protest on a street ever. And like, we are going to elevate those to what? A felony charge if you were arrested. So again, this is criminalizing dissent, criminalizing protesters. And we know that bill, they introduced that bill in the wake of the George Floyd protests of 2020.
So, French, as a union, this is how my organizer brain reacts to that. I start looking for the loopholes because, the history of unions picketing is that there were injunctions that said you can't block the factory gates, and then unions were like, "But what if we walk in a circle?"
Right.
And so I look at that and I'm like, aha, it says a person cannot do that. What if I bring horses? What if I light couches on fire and then leave? I
think horses actually would work.
Hell yeah.
I'm not really a friend of the horse. Like, they scare me. But I'd become one. I think every protest should be encircled in horses. But it usually is. But they're always working for the cops. They're working for the wrong side.
We saw Sorry to Bother You. We know the power of horses.
Oh God. I'm not gonna say it, but I am gonna say it. The weirdest turn of a film I don't think I ever predicted. Nato Green was also in Sorry to Bother You. No big deal. Last thing I'm going to say.
Please rent it because I need those $3 in residuals from every time you rent it.
Last thing I'm going to say, there has been some follow-up. Not only was there this DeSantis law, but 88 anti-protest bills have been introduced around the country since the Capitol riot. You think those things are targeting white supremacists and militias? I don't know. 33 of them were introduced in January 2021 alone. 11 of them post-January 6 laws have been enacted, giving authorities wide latitude to prohibit or punish protesters, and sometimes even providing legal protection to motorists who mow them down, which is insane. Motorists who mow them down, those have always been like far-right extremists, right? And in fact, it happened in Florida. Authorities in Florida prosecuted an anarchist and Black Lives Matter protester, Daniel Baker, purely over speech and social media posts, sentencing him to nearly 3 years in prison, roughly the same punishment as one Capitol rioter got for punching an officer. So, yes, in principle, it is good to have more oversight, in my opinion. There wasn't even cross-coordination between some of these agencies as to the rise of these extremist groups. But on a local level, we can see that they're being implemented and potentially going to harm activists and folks on the left and Black Lives Matter organizers more so than they ever will touch, I don't know, armed white militias. Anyway, we got to move on to our second story. I'm very curious as to what the dad in the room has to say about this, but this was the week. No, I'm talking about He-Man. He's over on the wall over there.
Oh, right.
He's right there. Beep. This was the week. That's a real dad. This was the week where Chicago teacher. Okay, starting again. This was the week where the Chicago Teachers Union once again flexed some power. As in the face of a COVID surge in cases and elective safety measures in the school district, they voted to move to remote learning. They're currently asking for universal testing for students, which they do not have right now, or weeks allowing them for them to transition to remote learning once again. However, the school district of Chicago has responded by canceling their classes, and Mayor Lori Lightfoot apparently has locked teachers out of their own virtual classrooms, so they are not able to go to remote teaching. Lori Lightfoot says, quote, what the teachers union did was an illegal walkout. They abandoned their posts and they abandoned kids and families. She said on Meet the Press, we are working diligently every single day at the bargaining table to narrow the differences and get a deal done. Okay. The teachers, however, are disputing issues, including testing and metrics to close schools. They want the option to revert to district-wide remote instruction, and they're refusing to teach in person until there's an agreement. This was as of Sunday, so I'm sure this is going to develop quickly. The district apparently says that, oh no, they've got new ventilation systems on the way. They have some money invested. Like basically, it's coming. Don't worry, it's coming. But here's what one parent is saying about that money that is coming into the school district and whether or not teachers and students are seeing that money.
It's back. What would make you feel comfortable?
I would feel better if they would just do more testing. I don't know why. We're the third largest school district in the country. LA is the second largest district, and they are doing weekly testing. CPS was given $2 billion in COVID funds. We as parents want to know, where's that money at? Because the testing has been selective. Like, everybody should be universally tested, the teachers, the students, on a weekly basis, to track what's going on with COVID.
So that was one parent of a Chicago student. Before I get Nato you to weigh in, I just want to clarify. There's about a 12% vaccination rate for students under 11 in Chicago. High schools are between 10% and 83%. The average at majority Black high schools in Chicago are about 28% vaccinated. And once again, Chicago is one of those cities that's seeing this rise in COVID cases and in hospitalizations and, yes, in deaths. And we'll see what the next couple of weeks hold. But, like, what is this like? Everyone's sort of like, it's the teacher's fault. It's not the teacher's fault. We should go back to school. We shouldn't go back to school. We're back in the thick of it, Nato. And it doesn't feel like there's a lot of leadership, at least coming, definitely not from the Biden administration.
Yeah, I mean, well, and we're seeing it at every level. And I mean, I think there's a couple of things happening. And, you know, my kids are in 8th grade. I have twins in 8th grade in San Francisco public schools. And it's a shit show in San Francisco also. And here's the thing that people don't understand in this debate. And it's pretty nuanced. And so stay with me, Francesca. That everyone is fucking sick. That's the problem. So, like,
say that again, because the internet gods tried to censor you.
Everyone is fucking sick right now. Like, that's the issue, is that, like, with, you know, that they're talking about the COVID case numbers are on a vertical incline as they're spiking, and the protocol is, it's 5 days or days of isolation or whatever. Like, the protocol is, if you test positive, stay home. And so, like, it's not just that, like, people want to be tested just to be tested, or HEPA filters or whatever. There was, like, we saw this coming. People were raising concerns in the public schools across the country, saying, like, what is the plan to try to, you know, how are we going to provide distance learning options for people who are testing positive but are asymptomatic, so that they don't come to school and infect everybody else, and for teachers who are testing positive, what's the plan for that? How are we going to absorb that? How are we going to test people who are returning from travel before we send them back into the classroom? And the district, like, didn't have a plan for that. And it's not just like, it's not a sick out particularly, it's that people are fucking sick. They're literally sick. And then they're staying home, and then the system is crumbling. The other thing that's happening is that, like, as always, there's these fucking opportunists are exploiting this moment, because overwhelmingly it's teachers unions that drive strikes in the United States. Like if you look at the numbers of strikes over the last 3 or 4 years, overwhelmingly it's been in schools. And so So like, I just feel like there's the sort of neo-consistency to teachers unions as the kind of like vanguard of popular resistance,
Yeah.
and that has nothing to do with like what the issue is about.
Yeah, I mean, and especially because, like, even last year, which everyone was like saying the year of the worker, Striketober, we weren't even talking about teachers. Like teachers weren't even flexing their muscle to the full extent last year. But we may see that. So you're totally right that like they're trying. Folks like Lori Lightfoot, other officials are like, we need to make sure to stave this off. But at the same time, wouldn't you think in order to stave it off, you just give them what they want? Like, don't lock them out of their goddamn schools. You're afraid of them going on strike, like a real strike. This ain't a strike. This is a complaint. This is a vote. This is a we can do better. It
Right.
is not a strike yet.
Yeah, I mean, and like we're seeing it. Yeah, it's just that the guidance is shifting. Like, about there's the CDC has a set of standards, and the state Department of Public Health has standards, and then local Department of Public Health has standards, and then there's like a disconnect between the local government and the school district. And and the
Right.
school district is not nimble, let's say, as an institution, uh, and but then like a lot of it is, these school boards, God bless them, but they're all volunteers. So like
Yeah.
the elected governing body are these like random ass volunteers who sit in hearings for 5 hours at a time and then go home, and on some level don't have really that much control over like the bureaucrats who really run the district.
And yet somehow in school boards and districts across the country, like parents are more incensed about critical race theory or what they imagine to be than COVID. Like, look, I think no one should be a busybody, and like, oftentimes we have liberal Karens too, but like go to your school board and complain. I think that's a perfectly legitimate thing to do. Like I think that's good, especially when all the bad parents are the ones complaining. Anyway, we will obviously continue to watch this. Meanwhile, my brother, who teaches at a public school, it's like all the windows are open, the filter's on, everyone's got their jackets, and is just like, like trying to learn, geometry in the cold.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I was like, actually this week I was in New York and I was talking to a friend of mine who is 15, and yeah, and has to eat lunch at 8:30 in the morning because they're cycling students through the cafeteria because there's no outdoor place for them to eat lunch, and so
Yeah.
they have to do social distancing. So they have people have lunch at ridiculous times because they have no other way to like. It's all
Oh
bad.
my God. Shout out to all the teachers and educators out there. With that, before I bring in our guest, I do want to just say that we're gonna do a final segment, a new segment called the Cringies. It's an award, the first award ceremony of the Bitchuation Room, the Cringies, and I hope Alicia Garza will stay on for it. Alicia, by the way, is an author, political strategist, and organizer who founded the Black Futures Lab to make Black communities powerful in politics. She's also the co-creator of #Black Lives Matter and the Black Lives Matter Global Network, co-founder of Supermajority, a new home for women's activism, and strategy and partnerships director for the National Domestic Workers United Workers Alliance. And of course, if you guys don't have her book, The Purpose of Power, How We Come Together When We Fall Apart, you should get it, read it, and listen to her podcast, Lady Don't Take No. She's so booked and busy. Please welcome Alicia Garza to the show.
Hi.
Hi.
Yo, what up?
So
good to have you here.
what is the purpose of power? Is it to get up like a parking place? What is the purpose?
Nato is going full throttle very, very quickly.
See, this is how we're starting things. This is good. Well, first of all, it's good to be here with y'all. Second of all, what the fuck is going on with Lori Lightfoot? Third of all, the purpose of power is to get rid of fucking people like that and put people in positions of decision making that will move our collective agenda forward. That's the only way that we're able to do it. And if we don't build the power we need, we're going to keep going around in these fucking circles, stressed out about people making not only bad decisions, but also having bad plans that are not just annoying, but they're actually deadly. So that's the purpose.
I like it. I do. I mean, yeah, it is. It's the idea that like we have to pay attention. Who the hell is representing us? Who's running us? Who's on the school board meetings? How the fuck are there Proud Boys in these meetings and no one's saying shit? You know, and like they're in cahoots with law enforcement. I do. You know, it's a year after January 6th, Alicia, and I just want your thoughts on, you know, what have we learned anything? Where do we go from here? And maybe just like general reflections on this 1 year anniversary, shitversary.
Well, what do you get one for this anniversary, right? Like if your first wedding anniversary, you're supposed to get like paper, you know, your 15th, you're supposed to get like diamonds. Like what do you get for this, right? Like what do you get when you give? I mean, look, it's bizarre that we are a year out, and you know, honestly, there's been very little consequences for insurrectionists who literally tried to overthrow the government through a violent coup. This, of course, came on the heels of an incredible victory in Georgia, where we, you know, pushed forward the first Black person to represent Georgia in the Senate since Reconstruction, and also put forward two very progressive lawmakers and legislators. So, you know, the insurrection, as if you will, was really a reaction and a response to the power that was being wielded by the majority in this country to try to put us on a different path and move us in a different direction. And I think in a lot of ways that gets lost, especially in the kind of pomp and circumstance of half-ass remembering, right, what happened and how we got there. And, you know, I was reflecting the other day that, you know, and this came up again for me, actually, when you were talking about this protest law in Florida, you know, where somebody's getting 3 years in prison for posting something on social media. And meanwhile, people who, you know, broke into Nancy Pelosi's office, sat in her chair, kicked back, put their feet up and stole some shit from her office and then did TV interviews about it, right? Face zero consequences. I mean, there are Black people in jail for weed that have spent longer in jail than any of these insurrectionists will, almost collectively, right? Yeah. So that's something for us to really pay attention to. And at the same time, I think that we have to keep paying attention to the way in which amnesia powers this country. If we're really good about sinking into the whys of how we got here and taking the lessons and integrating them, we'd be living in a completely different country right now. And we don't do that, and we don't do it on purpose. So I think it's important for us not just to kind of look back, but to stand still and say, hey, what the fuck just happened here? And why did it happen? We don't talk about the fact, and we've actually not had any more conversation about those pipe bombs that were found at the DNC, right? Like that was also a violent attack, most likely, right, by the growing extremist conservative movement in this country. So as long as we don't talk about it, as long as there are no consequences for people's actions, as long as we're focused on pomp, circumstance, procedure, and bureaucracy, as opposed to outcomes, we're going to continue to see these kinds of attacks happen. And I can tell you, Francesca and Nato, because the infrastructure has been weakened so much by the former president, right, but also by just complete idiocy, it's likely that there will be more of these attacks, and it's likely that they will hurt more and more people. And so this is something for us to really pay attention to going into 2022, but certainly going into 2024, where we have another rematch as it relates to the president of the United States.
I wonder, like, you know, we know people in our circle, you and I both know, who are like accelerationists, who think that like things getting really fucked up is somehow radicalizing for people.
Yeah, it's amazing. 800,000 people have died. It's amazing. Let's go.
Yeah.
What? You know what I mean? Anyways.
Yeah. So, I mean, I sort of, you know, I wonder how you sort of think about, like, in your theory of change, how you incorporate sort of like the idea of crisis and like instability in the system that is not of our making, and how we respond to it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, first and foremost, there is a core difference between crises that are of our making and crises that are not of our making and how we approach it. And accelerationism is a very dangerous tendency in our movement. And it's this notion, right, that things will get so bad, right, that people will suddenly spontaneously wake up and decide to take action, and not just action, but the right action. And that is completely historical, right? That just has not happened. And actually, where the power is, right, is being prepared to step into the chaos of crisis and lead. And in order to do that, right, we have to really be focused on what are the alternatives that we're trying to build? And if there are opportunities to bring those alternatives to bear, how do we become the leading force in doing that? So that's one piece of it. But then as an organizer, Nato, you and I both know that sometimes there are crises that we want to create, right? Because it helps people understand, right, why things are happening the way that they're happening, who's responsible, and it forces people to take a side. And in that case, I think, similar conditions apply. You don't just create crisis to create crisis. You create crisis for people to be able to make a decision about where they stand, but you also have to have a net that catches them and puts them into some kind of vehicle that allows them to take action and to increase their leadership in the process of taking action. So I worry a lot, right, that we don't have a sober assessment of power and how we build it and how much we've built thus far, where we are actually powerful and where we have a lot of work to do. And that's really why I wrote this book. This book was intended to get us to think about, right, how we think change happens, who we think needs to be a part of change, and how we might sharpen or refine our own practice to be better change makers and change agents.
I want to just say that briefly, when it comes to galvanizing moments and like bringing new people into the fold, and like, I'm like, I have been reading Nelson Mandela's autobiography for a long time, but like I'm making some headway now. It's long, it's so good, Long Walk to Freedom. But he talks about like how
long
the
read
ANC,
to freedom.
Yeah, more like long read. My God. He talks about like how the ANC, once they started doing actions, their numbers and ranks grew like exponentially. And I feel like we're in a moment where, and although it has not been organized, and it's been much more at the grassroots level, but you have Black Lives Matter organizers and organizing, and the more and more that is taken, street actions, I think that folks have come into that fold and have felt, and are excited by that, whether or not they become organizers or they are funneled into an organization, that's different. But then I look at January 6th, I'm like, yeah, they're doing actions too. Like they are recruiting off of these actions. And I know a lot of us are thinking, well, no, maybe they learned their lesson. Now they're getting locked up. I think they got way farther than anyone would have imagined they could have gotten. And they are recruiting off of these kinds of actions. So I am also aware of the way the right is taking these lessons of like, hey, do bigger actions, get more play, get more press, bring people into your fold, grow your ranks. And it frightens me.
It's scary. I mean, and they're also doing an incredible job, right, of finding people who are looking for answers as to why their lives are not what they want it to be. And they're giving them answers. And then they're giving them ways to take action around those answers. Yeah. It's so interesting. Like when I watched all of this unfold, I was still on a high from the day before, right? The 2 days prior was my 40th birthday, which I spent in quarantine. And then the following day, right, was January 5th when we had those momentous victories. And January 6th, I was still kind of cruising, and I was getting text messages about, go turn on the TV. White people are turning up at the Capitol. I'm thinking it's like, the right's version of like a move on protest. But what I saw was actually shocking. And it wasn't that they were turning up that was shocking. It was the delayed response of everybody else, right? Thinking that they were going to be safe in there, thinking that it was just a rally. Even though apparently we've come to find out, right, that there were warnings leading all the way up into this moment, that there were Congress people who were involved in, helping to plan it, helping to scope out the Capitol, helping to let people know where things were. I watched an interview last week with Congresswoman Pramila Jayapal and Congresswoman Ayanna Pressley, and they were, talking about kind of being in the chambers, right, and thinking that, that was the safest place for them to be. Nobody seemed to understand that it wasn't just Donald Trump being a fucking maniac, that actually part of his danger is that he had built this frenetic, frenzied, and really angry movement that was going to blow at any second. And that had been building for years, right? Yeah. And the response to it always was, well, we just have to get him out, and then everything's going to go back to normal. No, actually, we got him out, and they tried to overturn the government. They were like, we are not playing games. And that was actually a culmination of what this movement does really well, which is they get people amped up. They're giving people answers for why things are the way that they are. And then when they put out an action call, people are ready at a moment's notice because they have already been inoculated and inundated, right?
We know it's the lizard people / Jews / 5G / pedophiles. Let's go.
No, it's everything. It's everything. So.
And I wanted to ask you, I wanted to pivot because, you talked about drawing the line in the sand and picking sides. And I feel like so much of what is stalled any kind of justice thus far, and like we're still picking our, jaws off the floor, is the fact that the party with which you are supposed to be negotiating the future and the present of the country is embedded in that insurrection, was part of it. And so how can you move forward? How can you do anything until you address that? And yet what we can't not continue to live or run the government, right? It's, still have to, these are Congress people, have to go into work day in and day out, oftentimes next to someone who wanted them dead or who wouldn't mind if a mob had them killed, And so, you have a president right now who's Biden. And last time you were on in April, Biden was making good moves. This was this moment of like, I think you even said like, he seems to be ahead of the movements. And now it feels like he is very far behind. So I guess I want to check in, like temp check on Mr. Joe Biden. According to Alicia Garza, what are we doing here?
Not a whole bunch of much. We did start off the year really
Hold up. I tweeted some things.
We started off the year really well in the sense that the Biden administration came in and they went gung-ho on COVID relief and recovery, which was the right thing to do. Unfortunately, they also did not plug the hole in the dam, which was the Republicans and white supremacists. And as a result of that, they allowed this extremist movement to get back on its feet and to operate. And I think one of the things that is really unfortunate is that because of that, because they did not take this movement seriously, because they did not take the salience of this movement seriously, what they went back to was the same old shit, right? They went back to the same game plan, the same plays. And I'll give you an example. Democrats talk a lot, right, about how we only have these slim majorities. And so, the best that we can do is negotiate and compromise. That is absolutely fucking ridiculous. It is not true. Black voters led a multiracial coalition to hand over the keys, right? We were like, hey, check this out. We want change. We're going to give you the majorities that you need in order to do that. And basically just run the ball down the field for this first fucking year. Give us voting rights. Let us get police reform. Let's get COVID-19 relief and recovery. Let's even get some climate shit up in there. And if you can do that, we are going to hand you the midterms on a silver platter. What Democrats did was went back to the same old, same old. There seems to be some confusion that this Republican Party, which is now an extremist party, is maybe somehow any way resemblant of the Republican Party of the 1990s. And I can't believe that I could say to you right now, I would take George fucking Bush 17 times over compared to what we're dealing with right now.
HW. I'm going to say HW.
What the Democrats failed to do, right, was to wield that power that they were given. And unfortunately, what it's going to mean for 2022 is that we're going to lose majorities. We are absolutely going to lose majorities. And if we're not careful, right, it will be not 6 years down the drain, right? That's in a kind of like a normal push and pull type of cycle. We're going to be in for some big changes that are actually going to be 20-year, 30-year changes, mostly because of the almost complete erosion of democracy in this country. What the tatters of what wasn't great before. Without that, without people having access to the ballot and unnecessary restrictions on being represented and representing what you want, it's going to be not even an uphill battle. I think we're going to see a complete political change that we haven't seen in this country in my lifetime. So it's something for us to really pay attention to. I will also say, you know, and I talked about this on my podcast last week, that, you know, from a movement perspective, I think we have to think differently about how we engage the Democratic Party. I don't think we're in a position where we can throw out the baby with the bathwater. And, you know, speaking of accelerationists, I think there's a lot of people out there that are like, see, Biden didn't do shit for us. The Democrats don't do shit for us. And I'm like, look, we can keep having this age-old argument about have they done enough? Will they do enough? But power concedes nothing without a demand, right? And I don't think that we've actually made demands on the Democratic Party. I think we have done some interesting inroads of trying to take it over from the inside. But if I'm being honest with you, from my perspective, that hasn't actually been led by communities that have a lot to lose. And so we're actually replicating some of the same dynamics, right? Of kind of leaving out the people that really need to be up in there, controlling the money, right? Determining who the candidates are. And there's no consequences for the Democratic Party or any of its kind of branches when they don't actually get in line and get in lockstep. I was saying on my podcast, you know, it's not about being in an old Buick. Like an old Buick can be tight, but you have to be able to tell your passenger when they're fucking with your radio and messing with the mechanisms. You got to be able to pull over and say, get the fuck out. This is my car, my rules, right? Don't play my stations. Don't play with the mechanisms. Just sit here until we get to our destination. And I think our movement has to really think about, how do we do that in 2022? How do we do that with the midterms? Are there going to be consequences for Democrats that isn't just about staying home, but will there be consequences for the Democratic Party if they don't put forward the agenda and act on it in the way that we sent the mandate for in November and then again in January?
Yeah, I mean, the hard thing is I was just going to say really quickly, like, you know, Nancy Pelosi is worth $46 million with her and her husband's wealth. So, like, the consequences of a fascist taking over is never going to fall on the backs of people who have nothing to lose, who have all, you know, or you know, they're totally fine. They will be fine. They're not in precarious situations. Then you got John Ossoff introducing this legislation being like, no, Congress people and senators cannot trade in stocks. And I feel like it's his little trying to shoot his shot, because he knows, you know, senator from Georgia elected, as you're saying, on this with this popular movement, grassroots movement, to do something, hasn't been able to. And so at least there's a little bit of like, nuh-uh, the future of the Democratic Party is not you, Pelosi. It's us. Anyway, Nato, sorry, I cut you off.
I mean, I'd like to hear more about your vision of what, like, people talk a lot about, like, you know, we need to elect them and then we need to hold them accountable, and not concretely about what that looks like other than some angry tweeting and dunking, which, look, you know, cathartic, but like, it seems like what's so hard for me to process about this moment is that in many ways, like, social movements are as strong as they've ever been in our lifetime, but not strong enough.
Right.
And like, that there's like Congressional Progressive Caucus and people like Ilhan Omar and like that those I'm old enough to remember when the standard bearer of the progressives in Congress was Dennis Kucinich. Like, and
Sure.
like we've made progress.
Yeah.
Yes, we have.
So
Shit.
it's like but it's not enough. And so, it seems like very concretely, like consequences means um being willing to challenge incumbents in primaries, which is good and should happen more of. But then it raises the other problem that you were talking about earlier, Alicia, about like, if we win those elections, are we ready to govern? And if we have people who take those seats who like aren't ready to have to vote on 5,000 bills and amendments and know how the committees work, and like all the parliamentary procedures, they're just going to get rolled in there. And we've
Yeah.
seen it happen before.
Well, absolutely. So I think there's a few things that need to happen movement wise. One, I think we could do a lot more brushing up on our Civics 101. I'm really surprised most of the time at how little lots of us know about how government works. And so part of like, and I've been included in that, right? Like sometimes I have to look shit up, like what is the fucking filibuster? And like, how does that thing work? And right? We can't be afraid or ashamed to go back to that, right? I mean, public education in this country is such that like people aren't deeply steeped in that. You take a class once in high school and then that's it, right? But being a participating member of this country means we actually have to know how it's run. And if we hope to make change, it's not about knowing how it's run so we can play the game. It's actually just about knowing procedure and knowing what your chess moves can and can't be. And it helps sharpen your demands, right? Second thing I think is really important is that the day after elections happen, right? Or the day after people are sworn in is exactly the day where you have to be sitting with them, having a conversation about your agenda and what you want to see happen. I think we have to stop supporting people because of popularity. We have this phenomenon in politics where we try to Bernieize everybody and make them kind of a pop culture icon.
Silver bullet.
Yeah, that's all great and fine. Like it's good to popularize progressive candidates, but we still have to know what they actually stand for and what they don't. I just saw a very controversial article recently asking about whether or not, Stacey Abrams was a moderate or a progressive. And I was like, I think people need to have this conversation. I think lots of people just know her for her stances on voting rights, but we don't get into those nitty gritties about where people stand on our issues, especially because we get stuck in this, I want the first Black, I want the first woman, I want the first blah, blah, blah. I always tell people, I don't support anybody Black if they don't have a progressive agenda. I just don't. And I can love the fact that you're the first Black person to do a thing. And I can also not support or endorse what you're doing as the first Black person in that thing. And we have to be able to walk that line. And then the third thing I think is really important, Nato and Francesca, is I think that we've got to be very, 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 very clear about carrots and sticks. Now, I will say that, just recently, people have been talking a lot about San Francisco politics, right? And what's happening in the Tenderloin and Mayor Breed and kind of going the fuck off about police intervention.
Everyone, welcome to the next 7 hours of the podcast.
There's so much to talk about in there, but this is where I'm going to say it's so important to put alternatives on the table. I think we forget that legislators, most of them, they're not experts in policy. They take their lead from their staffers, and you never know who their staffers are or where they stand on things. And literally, like, I think there's a lot that's possible here that requires us to not just throw rocks at the castle, but also requires us to put some proposals on the table.
Yeah.
And I'll just say lastly in this, to wrap it up, you know, I don't want to do that thing where it's like, well, if you don't have a solution, you have no right to speak. But I do think it's what challenges us, right, to really sharpen our practice around how we hold people accountable. What are we holding them accountable around? Right? Yeah. What are we hold, like, whether or not they're likable? That doesn't fucking matter. Like, are they moving the right policy? Are they moving money? Do we show up in their budget? Right? Those are the litmus tests that we should be using. Yes. And outside of that, I think we're going to have a really hard time.
I just have a final question because, you know, since we last spoke, the Build Back Better Act has been,
I have a final question too.
Floated and tanked. No, Nato, we gotta move on. We really do.
I'll be less burning final question.
I gotta edit this motherfucker when we're done. No, that, you know, inside the Build Back Better Act was money for home care workers. Yeah. And I believe that still stood as of whenever the hell, you know, Joe Manchin last, you know, touched it with his bumped it with his yacht. But like, you know, so that's a perfect example of an organization that I know you've been involved with, which is Domestic Workers United and Alliance, that like has had a certain seat at the table to push that issue. People need home care. There needs to be money for home care workers. There needs to be investment in long-term elderly care, all those kinds of things. And yet Biden can just kind of ignore that. Like, oh yeah, that was nice. It was really nice to have domestic workers give a seat at the table. It made me look real good. I don't have to deliver for them. Mm-hmm. You know, like, how does that sit with you? Or are you like, I'm not giving up hope on BBB yet? Where are you at?
I'm not giving up hope on it. I think we know what needs to be done to move it forward, and we're just not doing it. And that is very much in Biden's control. Look, I'll be honest with you. You know, when people want to get a thing done, even if you're not a voting member, you can make it real easy or real hard for somebody's career, right? You can make it real comfortable or real uncomfortable. And I don't see Biden really turning those screws, right? I see him as really trying to figure out, how does he get to be the man who says, I brokered an incredible deal. There's no brokering with these people. And I'm not just talking about the Republicans. I'm talking about all of the obstructionists, which includes Kristen Sinema. It includes Joe Manchin. They fucking represent nobody in relationship to like all the other people who represent the majority of the country who want this thing. Even in their own districts, people want this thing. So why have we allowed Kristen Sinema and Joe Manchin to break ranks with the party that's in power? Right. And what consequences are they experiencing from doing that? And Biden has the ability to actually levy consequences. And if he were to pull in his VP for support in that, we'd be having a whole set of different conversations.
Apparently, they're not allowed near each other. Manchin and Harris are like, you know, apparently, like, if the vice president looks at him weird, he gets upset and goes home.
I'm like, sick her ass on him. And I feel like Biden should finish it. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, like, yeah, totally.
Like Mortal Kombat style, right? Like, if you cross Nancy Pelosi, do you think that you can move the way you want to move? No. She's like, let me tell you something. I run shit up in here, and you are going to understand how much I run shit. That's what's happening behind the scenes. And I think the same thing needs to happen with the Senate. And I think the president and the vice president need to be involved.
Yeah. Her office is still mad at me for a prank that I did 5 years ago.
Listen, I believe it.
I delivered a 6-foot styrofoam spine to her office right after Trump was elected.
This is Pelosi.
To Pelosi, and a bunch of people were mad. A bunch of people were with me. Like, it was, well, I wasn't by myself, but
listen, they have long memories, except when it comes to actually getting stuff done for people. So there's that on that.
I gotta call it on this interview discussion. in the sitch. We got to move on. Alicia, will you stay for just one more segment very quick? I mean, it'll, thank you so much. Just a couple comments I wanted to read out from the awesome people in the chat right now. Fat guy named Tiny on Twitch says, the first anniversary of January 6th is paper, arrest warrants specifically. So
come true. I heard that.
Saria Mao says, poor people in red states have been manipulated for generations by the right, and the left just stood by and let it happen. Yeah, losing any kind of working class roots. And Lava Q says, the dystopian states of amnesia. I don't know. That I feel like it should be the United States of Amnesia or the dystopian states of America. We'll workshop it either way. But you guys, we've got a new segment. This is really fun. I am excited about this one. We've got an award show here on the Bitchuation Room. I'm introducing now. We're calling it the Cringies. Who deserves a cringy for the week? Let it rip, baby. That's me, baby. All right, for this week, the Cringies. The nominees are Ted Cruz for his whiplash reversal of whether or not the people who stormed the Capitol on the 6th were terrorists. After getting called out by Tucker Carlson, he completely backtracked on it. Take a look.
Solemn anniversary this week, and it is an anniversary of a violent terrorist attack on the Capitol, where we saw the men and women of law enforcement demonstrate incredible courage, incredible bravery.
3 days later.
You called this a terror attack when by no definition was it a terror attack. That's a lie. You told that lie on purpose, and I'm wondering why you did.
Well, Tucker, thank you for having me on. When you aired your episode last night, I sent you a text shortly thereafter and said, listen, I'd like to go on because the way I phrased things yesterday, it was sloppy and it was frankly dumb. And
I don't buy that. Whoa. I don't buy that. Look, I've known you a long time, since before you went to the Senate. You were a Supreme Court contender. You take words as seriously as any man who's ever served in the Senate. And every word, you repeated that phrase. I do not believe that you used that accidentally. I just don't.
Cringe. Oh, okay. That's nominee number 1. Nominee number 2 for making themselves a total clown this week is our girl Nancy Pelosi. We just spoke about for introducing a sort of like a memorial or in memory of January 6th by using the cast of Hamilton singing Dear Theodosia. I'll just play a little bit of this.
The conversation. We're privileged to have a contribution from one of the great creative talents of our time, Lin-Manuel Miranda. May his beautiful words be an inspiration to us. Among the words he said and in the music, we'll make it right for you. If we lay a strong enough foundation, we'll pass it on to you and we'll give the world to you. Lin-Manuel and his father and the Hamilton singers, who we'll hear from, said that they were all very honored to be asked to participate today. I call your attention to
the Hamilton singers. Da da da.
Love that strong enough foundation. How's that working out?
There was, they stormed the scaffolding around the strong foundation. Oh, God. It just papered over with Hamilton. It'll all be better. All right. That is cringy nominee number 2. Cringy nominee number 3. Candace Owens was called out by a follower for not being vaccinated because she was inside of a UFC fight. And she had a very long and drawn out explanation why she is still unvaccinated, but was inside that UFC Madison Square Garden where you have to be vaccinated in order to get in.
Next question. Are you really unvaccinated? Really? And then there is a shared tweet that says Candace Owens is lying to her followers about being vaccinated. And it shows me at the UFC. And it's, I guess, planning for your event. Oh, the Madison Square Garden website, which says that you've had at least one dose of the COVID-19 vaccine prior to attending. I would say to the people, first and foremost, I am obviously unvaccinated. You follow the story of me trying to get a COVID test in Aspen, and I only had to get a COVID test to show that it was negative because I was unvaccinated. So I didn't go through those jumps and hoops pretending to be vaccinated. I am not getting this vaccine ever. Regarding the UFC event, I would instruct you not to visit the Madison Square Garden website, but to visit the New York City Law website. You better understand that every time the elites make laws for you, there is a way that they can get around the laws that they're making for you. And there are carve-outs in New York City of when you do not need to present a vaccine card. Unfortunately, I fall under one of those carve-outs.
Because I am an elite and I found my way around it. And you better realize that I am making money off of you, idiot. Oh my God. So that is cringy nominee number 3, Candace Owens. Who are you giving this week's cringy to? Nato, you want to start?
Yeah, I gotta say Nancy Pelosi for 3 reasons. Number 1, she clearly forgot Lin-Manuel Miranda's last name while she was reading it. Number 2, she brought up his father for no reason at all. And number 3, they picked the wrong song from Hamilton. If you were going to drag it into Hamilton for this, I feel like on January 6th, I feel like the right song should have been Your Obedient Servant. Which is just like where it's like 3 minutes of them insulting each other, and then they have to murder each other. I think that sets the right tone.
Yeah, something with any combativeness,
some fire in the belly. I think that would have been the right song for the moment. That's why I pick Pelosi. Ted Cruz, I would say, like, it's not. I mean, it's Ted Cruz is being a spineless, craven, like, opportunist. Day that ends in Y. The only surprise in that is that Tucker Carlson thinks that he's important enough that they're on a texting basis. That was a shock in that story.
Yes. And that he ran to him. That he oh my God. Alicia, who gets your cringy? Nancy has one.
I'm giving my cringy to Nancy too. And I think the only thing that could have made it more cringy is if she was wearing that kente cloth that she kneeled with last year.
She wanted, shall I bring it? No, Nancy, leave it behind. But it's beautiful. Well, it might not be our maze, but she's nothing but anyway. Oh God. She forgot his name. Lin-Manuel looks down. Miranda. Okay, so I guess Nancy gets the cringy. I was gonna give it to Candace Owens for no other fact than because she revealed that she was an elite, and she was sort of like trying to convince the audience that because believe you me, we elites. She just left out the we. She was like, elites find a way around vaccine mandates because we can go wherever we want, private planes, whatever. And so just so much cringe, so terrible, so revealing. And Ted Cruz loves to be humiliated. So that dude doesn't get my vote. He doesn't get the award. He wanted that. That's his kink. He's has a little half chub under there as he's talking to Tucker. I'm sorry. That was disgusting. Alicia Garza, where can everybody find your work?
Ted Cruz is a piss bottom, is what you're saying.
Oh yeah, for sure. I don't even want you to describe what that is.
Oh, shit. Thank you so much for having me. It was awesome to be here with y'all. If you want to catch me on the socials, you can find me on Instagram at Chasing Garza, or you can find me on Twitter, but not really, at Alicia Garza. And I'm on Meta too, and you'll just have to find me in the metaverse.
Woo! And everybody,
I have
please.
a special helmet for it.
Yeah, awesome.
Oh Lord, I gotta see this. That's where they're going to talk San Francisco politics later on in the metaverse. Thank you, Alicia. Everybody, check out her book, also The Purpose of Power, and take very good care. We'll see you soon.
Peace out.
Nato Green. Nato and I are going to continue this conversation for another 15 minutes because we're going to talk about the two Republicans trying to save their party. That is Liz Cheney and her father, Dick Cheney, still alive after all these years. So become a patron to get access to that conversation right after this. We're going to look at a couple things they said and did this week. Patreon.com/Bitchuation Room. You know what it is. Nato, how can people find you and your awesome work?
Nato Green on Twitter, Mr. Nato Green on Instagram. My albums are on Bandcamp, which is the best way to support the arts and, in the streets with the people.
Hell yeah. Nato, take good care. See you on the other side in the bonus. And thank you guys for being here. And it is time for the ceremonial song of thanks. And no, this will not be bottled and sold, neither as an NFT or in any sort of used yogurt container. This is the fart song. Thank you so much to all of the super chats, to all of the subscribers, to all of the people who've given to the show. I don't know what I'm saying right now. To the new patrons at $10 or more, which gets you this shout out. Gail R, you're amazing. Mars Supial, I love it. I see what you did there. To the big tippers, Ben J, Raylon S, Rio F, Robert G, thank you. To the new Twitch subs, Robo Blake, D Cashmer, Harry Balsich, thank you for giving out those 5 community subs, Harry. Fargo is high, Pagan Communist just here for the drinks. Thank you for giving out those 5 community subs. Irie Man 42 gave out 11 subs. Oh my god, thank you. And thank you for resubscribing Daisy Dragon, Depressed Progressive, Willie Gus, and Late Bloomer 66, and Kathy McIntyre. You're so generous with your super chat. Big ol' heart right back at you guys. Again, we are here every Sunday, 5-8 Eastern. The Bitchuation Room streams. And I got to thank our new producer, Paige Omek, behind the scenes, figuring out all the bells and whistles, just crushing it. And thank you to Maximilian Inhofe and, of course, Alexandra Ornes on the other side of all your amazing comments. You guys, once again, stay tuned for details on the Brooklyn show. But for now, we'll see you in the bonus. And obviously, fight the power, fuck the patriarchy, and don't just bitch about it. Be about it. Goodbye.